Well, good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining us on this Remembrance Day service. Now, I'm going to pivot just a little bit from what I was thinking of starting with 2 weeks ago, because of a couple of things that happened this week, two monumental things, and the first one kind of got lost in the fallout from the second one. The first one was that we lost Murray Sinclair this week, the judge, the senator, a giant of social justice in Canada. Murray, as some of you know, was the driving force behind the Truth and Reconciliation process with Indigenous people of this country, and he set the tone for how this work would be done, doggedly yet respectfully. And Murray had been working on his memoirs these last few years with the help of his son, and he felt he had entered what he called his swamp years, swamp time, when, as he put it, the water around you starts to deepen, and the ground beneath you shifts, and the earth becomes invisible, and each step represents an unknown risk. You can become afraid to move, and yet you cannot stand still. So Murray had his own reasons for using language like that, but somehow I think it's language that resonates right now because of the other monumental thing that happened this week, which I think we're a little bit in shock from, those U.S. election results. We went from, how is this race even close, to, that happened, that cannot be possible. And the outcome is one of those things that's sometimes called a hyper event. It's just too big to get our heads around, and the implications just create too much chaos in our heads. We can't process them. So I'm going to suggest that at a time like this, sometimes the thing to do is to draw the circle close. So today we're going to immerse ourselves in intimate stories, one in particular, because in a way the little picture is the big picture. The little picture reflects back to us who we are as individual actors, what we're made of, what it's in us to be. So with that, I think we should open the window and let's plunge into this song, our gathering song number 1022, and let's give it a go.
Open the window, children. Open the window now. Open the window, children. Open the window, let the dove fly in. Open the window, let the dove fly in. Mama and Papa are fighting like snakes. Open the window, let the dove fly in. Babies are crying like your heart will break. Open the window, let the dove fly in. Open the window, children. Open the window now. Open the window, children. Open the window, let the dove fly in. Open the window, let the dove fly in. Neighbors lock their doors, build fences so high. Open the window, let the dove fly in. Don't see what's to cover on the other side. Open the window, let the dove fly in. Open the window, children. Open the window now. Open the window, children. Open the window, let the dove fly
Wow, everybody learned that very quickly. Nice. Thank you. Well, again, welcome everybody. My name is Bruce Grierson. I'm your service associate this morning. Happy to be here. For those joining us for the first time, thank you for giving us a try. And we hope you feel welcome here. In this community, we celebrate people from all walks of life, no matter what your religious story, or even if you even have one, no matter what you do for your beans and bread, no matter who you are or who you love, you absolutely belong here. And I hope you truly feel that by the time we turn over the chairs in about an hour. We gather here in gratitude on the traditional unceded land of the Coast Salish people, particularly the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh people. May we be good neighbors to one another, good stewards to our planet, and good ancestors to our children. And now to light the chalice this morning, I'm going to second Jel Coward up from his duties at the sound table there. Jel, as you know, is one of the absolute load-bearing pillars of this community. Well, and you know, it is my honor to have you up here with me. Now, here's a quote. It's hard to light a candle in the cold November rain. This may be the first time anyone has ever evoked Guns N' Roses in a Unitarian chapel. But that's Axl Rose there, and his words are apt, I think, because it's hard to be hopeful in times like this. But honestly, we don't have a choice, you know. The cold November rain is coming for our candle, but we shield the candle and we light it anyway. We kindle this flame as a symbol of our gathering. And the second candle we light is a candle of joys and concerns, and that's personal events that have happened in the lives of some of the congregation here. I've got a few to mention here. Lynn Webster is in hospice near LGH. She'd welcome friends to come for a very short visit and say goodbye. Wayne Hanna had his surgery this week, and it went well, and he's at home resting. Sonia is thinking of her daughter, Penny Atkinson, born November 11th, 1945. Tomorrow I didn't do the math here. 45, Sonia, 45 to, okay. It would be her birthday tomorrow. They didn't tell me math is going to be. Global concerns, where to begin? What words are enough? Ever. Robin Wall Kimmerer said, sometimes language gets in the way of the work we have to do here. When we reach our deepest moments, words are an insult. So let's light this one in silence. And thank you, Jill. And continuing with our theme of quiet observance, we're going to try something a little bit different today, and this is a salt ritual, and it will be done mostly in silence too. But I'll just set it up here. So why salt? Well, salt is what humans produce when you squeeze us. When we're in extreme circumstances, we make things like sweat and tears and blood. And it's interesting, I was reading an obit of Murray Sinclair this week, and there was a detail that stayed with me. When they did the Truth and Reconciliation work in Victoria, survivors of the residential schools shared their stories, and those stories were collected, but they weren't the only thing that was collected. The tears shed were also collected. This was Murray's idea. Literally, the tissues that people used were gathered and saved. So salt is an important part of who we are. And salt can actually also be a balm. Isaac Denison said, there's nothing that can't be cured with salt water. Tears, blood, sweat, and the sea. So today, this morning, we're going to create a little bit of salt water ourselves. And I'm going to invite people to come up as you're able, as you feel moved to do so, and just take a little pinch of salt. We'll kind of make two columns So this side will come up this way, and this side will come up this way. I'll try to kind of keep traffic control here. And you'll take a little pinch of salt in your hand, and I want you to consider saying the name of somebody you loved and lost, either out loud or just in your mind as you drop it into the water, like this. I'll start. Ken. And once salt dissolves in water, you can't see it anymore, but you know what's in there. And so it is with the people we've loved and lost. So as you feel moved to do so, and if you need a little help on the stairs, some of us can do that. And just come on up, and Catherine will play softly here as we say the names. Well, in my experience, there are two main ways that war veterans process war. The first one is they can't stop talking about it. You know, with relatives, with friends, over pints with their buds down at the Legion, they find meaning in re-inhabiting that time in their life when they felt so alive and so full of purpose. A second way veterans process war is they never talk about it. And this was my father. He was that second kind. There just wasn't much to be got out of him when the subject came up. Dad, I asked, all us kids asked, what was it like going to war? Actually being in a war, in that war, the Great War, Part 2. And his answer was always the same. I hope you never find out. End of conversation. So that is a hurdle if you're trying to understand someone you love deeply. And it's doubly unhandy if you're a writer who's trying to flesh out in your mind an explanation for why people of order dropped into chaos can actually function. How can that work? When my father died of cancer at age 66, I realized I'd lost my opportunity. The story of that period of his life was gone forever. Or it occurred to me one day, as I was missing him so much I was almost resorting to casting spells to try to bring him back. I could try something. I could attempt to piece the story together from the only primary sources who were still alive, the members of his flight crew. The lads of RCAF 7635 Pathfinder Squadron, who flew a dozen missions together over Germany between 1944 and 1945 in a Lancaster bomber, a bit like This one. A little digging produced their names. There was the radio operator, Doug Taylor, the radar guy, Rusty McCrimmon, the engineer, a gent from Cork, Ireland, named Paddy, we couldn't find his last name, Cease Donovan, the mid-upper gunner, Howie Cope, the tail gunner, and seventh and finally the captain of the airplane, Cedric Kinnaird. I found those last three men. They were living in the Comox area. And before picking up the phone, I did a little gut check. Like, would they even be interested in meeting with the 26-year-old son of their old navigator? Howie, when I reached him, said, "Absolutely, mate. Come on down." So I hopped on the ferry to the island to fill in that missing chapter. Now, before I go any further, I can assure you, or at least I hope it's the case, that what you're about to hear is not a History Channel snapshot of war burnished with jingoism and heroism. If I have any goal here, besides sharing what I learned from these guys who held each other's lives in their hands 80 years ago, it's to try to answer the question, how is it that people who are fundamentally sweet-natured can go to war? Like, how can you even follow through with a commitment like that? What kind of deals do you have to make with yourself or your God or your ancestors or your future children to even stay in the arena? And how can you return, raise a family, and be able to shield them from what it did to you? That is the real reason we observe Remembrance Day, I think. It's not just to remember the sacrifices, although that's part of it. It's to ask the question, how is it that our species cannot seem to get beyond this killing each other en masse? How is it that we have not only not eliminated war, we've actually ramped it up in multiple places on Earth? Remembrance Day to me is the task of remembering who we used to be when we said, "Never again," and meant it. Cease was living in a trailer park in the Courtenay-Comox area, and that's where the four of us sat down to tea. And there they were, Cease Donovan, a genial little man with a salt and pepper beard and a twitching left eye. Howie Cope, a thin man who looked a bit like Jimmy Stewart. And Cedric Kinnaird, a quiet gentleman of regal bearing, as fits the image of the one who pilots the plane. Cease was the most talkative of the lot by far. He was that first type of veteran, the ones who are kind of into reliving the war years, which is ironic because after the war he rejoined the forces as an airframe mechanic stationed in Europe, and therefore he was the only one to actually see the devastation on the ground firsthand. Howie and Cedric, they were that second kind of veteran, the ones who preferred to forget. I came to the conclusion that they'd agreed to meet me out of respect for my father, but they took no great pleasure in this trip back through memory lane. So it was mostly from Cease that I would come to appreciate what these 7 men had gotten themselves into, what it was like to be in the Pathfinders. Now, I knew it was a dangerous detail. What I didn't realize was how dangerous. The job of a Pathfinder's plane basically was to provide the other bombers with something to aim at. The Lancs flew so high, well above the clouds, that you couldn't see your target on the ground. So the Pathfinders went on ahead and dropped flares, and those were what the other bombers targeted on as the flares drifted down. But of course, as soon as those flares appeared in the sky, the Pathfinders themselves became visible to the enemy. Cease said the artillery batteries on the ground would aim at the lights in the clouds. Now the Pathfinders dropped something else, pellets of tinfoil called window. And this would create cover for the airplanes in behind them by confusing the enemy radar displays, by making a snowstorm, kind of. But it was a snowstorm that fanned out from behind the Pathfinder, so it looked basically like an arrow pointing at the airplane. Not ideal. It gets worse. The Pathfinders also carried bombs. So after they dropped their flares, they would circle back round and join the bombing stream. They tucked in below the other airplanes to avoid collisions. So now they're in the way of two things: Axis fire coming up from the ground and their own Air Corps' bombs coming down from above. Cease reached into a folder and produced a photo of the entire squadron posed beneath the wings of a Lancaster. He pointed to a group of 4 handsome young Aussies in the front row. Yeah, they were wiped out, he said. I said, Cease, wow, this is all amazing context, thank you. But what I really want to know is, what did it feel like? What was it like to go on a mission? And he said, well, you're in there, in the airplane, you're nervous, you're on the tarmac, smell of gas is thick in the air, you have helmets on that cut the noise of the engine roar. Your father sat behind the pilot and the flight engineer on the port side at the chart table, he said. He called that his office. The light on the chart table was the only light in the airplane. There was a thick curtain between him and the pilot so the light wouldn't spill into the cockpit and make it hard for them to see up there. My father, Cease told me, would look out at the window and pick up the stars. That's how he navigated, with a sextant, old school. The other navigator, Rusty McCrimmon, had a more high-tech device. He had radar. But since using the radar gave away the plane's position to the enemy, it was mostly shut off. So my dad was plan A. And C said, I firmly believe that it was your father's navigation that got us into the Pathfinders. And I thought I heard a little double clutch there, like, thanks, I think. Thanks for getting us into the most dangerous detail in the RCAF. And so in that little trailer in Comox, the morning spilled into afternoon, and Cease spun hair-raising stories of mission after mission, like the time the crew was returning from a daylight raid on Peenemünde, and they were swarmed by German Me-262 fighters coming directly at them, an apparent kamikaze mission, and they juked and jived and avoided them, but 2 of those fighters peeled around and were suddenly on their tail, and Howie, through his tail gunner's hatch, watched another Allied bomber burst into flames. And then the pilot, Cedric, here he is picking up the tail. He said, I put that old lank into a severe corkscrew to avoid being hit, and down they spun, shuddering into the clouds, pulling out of the dive at the last minute, and flying home between the raindrops. Another night, over Stuttgart, a bomb got caught in the bomb bay doors, which had frozen shut. And as they came in for a landing, the ice began to thaw, and on the tarmac, everybody held their breath as the ice bomb was eased into a sling, rolled away, and defused. And that's when I said, kind of stupidly, but it seemed like the only question that mattered, were you scared? And Cedric said, we didn't have time to be scared. My father lived among the guys over there, choking down English sausage in the mess hall. Apparently it tasted like sawdust and grease. Sleeping in his flight suit when the barracks got cold as a meat locker. One time he and a fellow airman got sick at the same time up there, and they leaned forward and puked into bags, their foreheads touching. Dad lived among the guys, but he was never one of the guys, not really. There's a quote by J.D. Salinger's biography, Ian Hamilton. Outsiderism is not easy to sustain in combat, but somehow my father managed it. I learned there was a pre-flight ritual among the crew. It was the closest thing they had to a prayer. Before taking off on a raid, the men lined up and they peed on the port wheel of the plane. And they all did it, except my father. He had too much class, Howie said. My own suspicion, and this is me speaking now, is that he just could not overcome his sense of what was proper Christian behavior. Yeah, your dad was a little different from the rest of us, said Howie. He didn't smoke, didn't drink, didn't go out with girls. We were a bunch of punks. We got into trouble for him. Back at the barracks, my father maintained a buffer around him. He fashioned a little corner for himself, scavenged wood for shelves for his books, and there he read quietly and studied and wrote letters home. He had his own moral weather system, and he brought it up into the airplane with him. In some of their later missions, Cedric recalled, I used to gun the old Lanc to somewhat more than 165 knots to get home earlier, with a severe reprimand from your dad, since 165 was the speed limit in the flight plan. A picture was emerging here. My father made Mr. Rogers look like a Hell's Angel. I mean, he was just so squeaky clean, and I've got to confess, I have mixed feelings about that. His severe moral uprightness. I mean, I sort of respect it. I do respect it. But also, come on, man. You know, you're so concerned about your sense of your duty to God that you put it before your duty to the esprit de corps of your own team. Peeing on the tire, that would have been so good for morale in that moment. When you're about to take this staggering leap of faith together, what would Jesus do? I think Jesus pees on the tire. But to cut my father some slack, he's 21 years old, a missionary's son. He's trying so hard to be exemplary, and I gotta respect him for that too. I've gotta love him for that. And here's the other thing I see him doing as evidenced in these letters. He's trying to honor his father, but he's also pushing back a bit against his father's stern Presbyterian ways by trying to keep things light. He's figured out there's a kind of a magic in that. All over the theater of war, in barracks, in trenches, in camps, black humor is keeping soldiers alive. So he's experimenting with keeping things light with the only person he feels he can safely do that with, my mother. In early December 1944, she asked him in a letter how things were going, and he recounted that every time the unit moved to a new station, he'd hunt for a wireless and rig it up to the barracks lights so that in the morning when the first person stirred, the radio would come on and wake him up. And he said, quote, Grierson's cozy corner has been issuing forth Christmas music, either from the radio loudspeaker or from my own vocal cords, he wrote. When the fellows hear me singing, a chorus of voices pleads, please put the radio on again. A little later he writes to my mom, there's something about the Air Force that gets one deep down inside. At first, I couldn't imagine what it was, but I finally tracked it down to the potatoes we had at noon. It's like he's Mr. Saturday Night all of a sudden, sharpening up his comedy chops, but again, only with her. Maybe he thought his compatriots didn't need it the way she did back home with nothing to do but wait. On New Year's Eve, he signs off with motto for the year 1945. Give me a sense of humor, Lord. Give me the grace to see a joke, to get some happiness in life, and pass it on to other folk. There he is, age 21, ready for the air. My mom saved all those letters from overseas in a Smiles and Chuckles chocolate box, and late in her life she gave them to me, a treasured gift. And other letters were in there too, like one from 1947 to his own mother. My dad tells his mom he's just read an article in the Saturday Evening Post that really impressed him. It was about this new group that's formed to help men fight the temptation of drink, this upstart organization called Alcoholics Anonymous. He wrote, I think that condemning drink won't help. What we need is to replace the urge to drink with something else, like sports or some other constructive activity. And right here, I can hear his father running right through him, like, this is how we need to live, son. This is how you need to lead. But here's the part that I find hard to square. My father is saying, the best roadmap I've found is to follow this fellow Jesus, the Prince of Peace. So, you're following the Prince of Peace, but here you are at war. How does that work again? At one point, I put the question to my 3 conversation partners, "Why did you enlist?" Cease piped up, "Blind patriotism," he said. Howie said, "I joined the Air Force to keep from getting drafted into the Army, and I expect your dad did too." And it could well have been as simple as that. I don't sense that there was a lot of deliberation. If ever there was a just war, this was it. That was the narrative, right? And too much nuance in that story might have weakened the commitment to resist Hitler. It's like, look, this bad dude is running roughshod. Good dudes like you men need to stop him. And I get that. It helps to have that story in your head going in. But still, when they were in the middle of it, I can't imagine these soldiers' minds didn't sometimes drift down to the innocent civilians below them that they were dropping bombs on. Like, what is success for a bomber crew? How do you define it? Has anybody ever visited this cathedral in Cologne, Germany? Yeah. Magnificent 13th century Gothic cathedral. Here it is in 1944, surrounded by the city in ruins. So if you take a tour of that cathedral, the tour guides will still sometimes tell you that it's still standing because Allied planes bombed around it. Wrong, says Howie. You just hit the city, he said. That's about all you could hope for. The targets were usually munitions dumps and ball-bearing factories, but villages were struck as well, civilians killed, everybody knew it. My father didn't see it like Howie did, but he knew it. Howie just described how one night while bombing the German port city of Kiel, trying to knock out submarine pens, their plane sank a ship which unexpectedly was in getting repairs. "I saw the ship in the flash off the water," Howie said. He just went, "Oh crap, that wasn't supposed to be there." The strike was confirmed in the paper several days later. It was never reported how many were on board. There's a saying, there are no unwounded soldiers in war. What were my father's wounds? What were those wounds hidden inside the silence that he wrapped his war experience up in? As I say, he never spoke of the war, but afterward, he showed his revulsion of it in the way he raised us kids. We were never allowed to even pretend to have a gun, to even make a shooting gesture, or even use war metaphors. We got around that by using sports metaphors, which are basically war metaphors. We said grace at the dinner table every night. His were Christian words, but honestly, the words were kind of immaterial. The message was, you are just a lucky son of a gun. We all are. Things could so easily have been so different. We weren't to be complacent about the good things that we got to enjoy in life. We weren't to take our freedom for granted. We weren't to whinge about small inconveniences in the course of our massively privileged days. These things weren't explicitly stated, but they were modeled. Many of you will remember the amazing reflection Sue did last year when she told the story of her father, Clancy, a World War II veteran, which was also the love story told through the letters he and Sue's mom exchanged through the war. Unlike my father, who experienced battle from a remove 4 miles high and well away from the gore, Clancy saw it up close. He was in it. He was there when the camps were liberated. He described it as, quote, pure horror. And he too found a way to compartmentalize all that, and he went on to become this super honorable father to 5 kids. And one of my big takeaways from Sue's service was just how jeopardy on that scale changes us at the level of the soul. How character is absolutely forged in circumstances of fear and pressure and hardship. And the soldier who comes home is damaged and burnished and annealed, all of those things. There's a Maria Popova line, how you love, how you give, and how you suffer, those things are just about the sum of who you are. How you love, how you give, and how you suffer. And here's the part where I finally get around to the title of this reflection. I often wondered about my father. You are the sweetest man alive. How is it that you could have mustered it in sufficient quantity to do the job over there? It, the big terrible thing. How could you have ginned up the hate? Because isn't that what war runs on? War requires you to hate. Or maybe it doesn't. Not really. You can argue that the reason soldiers fight, well, obviously there's no single reason. Soldiers are individuals and they all have their reasons. But one of the reasons soldiers fight is not because they hate what's in front of them, but because they love what's behind them. The humans, the systems, the values, a future that branches. Blind luck, man. That's what it comes down to. How many times the dice landed the right way and those guys escaped death to keep advancing round the board game to the square called have child, push genes into the future so that said child may one day reflect on the unlikeliness of his own existence and the inscrutability of war and the inevitability of God. And if she does exist, what is she thinking? My father made it back. So many didn't. I did as these have done, but did not die, said Siegfried Sassoon, the great war poet. There's no understanding it. We are free to have conversations like this that have no resolution and really have no purpose except that through them we connect. We explore and we connect. Is there more? I hope we never find out.
There he
It's time for our offering. This month's outreach recipient is Food Stash. The main purpose of this beloved to us nonprofit is to rescue food that would otherwise be wasted and get it to families and organizations that can really use it. Please consider giving as generously as you are able. The ushers, please come forward. Thank you, Allison, for these gifts and all that you do to keep this experiment in distributed ministry that we've got going aloft. Thank you. Okay, some announcements. Usually we say this is when to come downstairs into the basement to join us for soup or sandwiches or coffee. Today it's just coffee and it's just upstairs. So please do hang around and talk to whoever you like. We just are going to kind of keep it on this floor today. A couple of other things. Hope Matters is a group that helps people get in touch with and deal with their eco-grief, and it has upcoming sessions on November 22nd and December 13th. You can attend in person or on Zoom. I think Marcia Stevenson's probably the person to contact on that. And there's an upcoming off-site Fun Fest event called Festive Frolics, and Leslie White is the contact person on that, I believe, and Tricia Mason as well. Maybe that's it for the main things. Check your e-bulletin, because there's always a few other things going on that I don't think to say here. Next service, next Sunday, wouldn't you know it, it's me again. And so moral beauty, I don't want to say too much, except that moral beauty, as I'm defining it, is one of those things that you kind of know it when you see it. And when you have it bestowed upon you, and these days when you see it, it really stands out amongst everything else. That is pretty much it, and I think we're gonna bring this right down onto the tarmac now with a congregational hymn. Really, could there be anything else? Let there be peace on earth.
I think we have a lot of moral beauty in this room. Please rise.
Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with thee. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be. With love as our beacon, joy in all are we. Let me walk with you, friend, in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with thee, and let's take a moment now. With every step I take, let this be my solemn vow, to take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me.
Just thank you, lovely. Just before we extinguish the flame, I want to leave you with a little something, and a hat tip to Sue on this one, and to Mary Bennett for putting me onto a nonprofit collective called Reasons to be Cheerful. And so in the run-up to Tuesday's election, this group put this question to people: no matter who wins, fill in the blank. And more than 500 people responded. And from those responses, the poet Rebecca Faulkner created a poem, a kind of found poem, and it goes like this: no matter who wins, I won't give up. I will live lightly on the land, wave to passing cars, embrace those closest to me, listen to less news and more music. Stand up for what I believe in. No matter who wins, I will continue to fight for justice and human rights. I will still ride my bike, share my story, keep working to decarbonize my community. I will advocate for individuals living with mental illness, be be the best grandmother, make kindness my priority. No matter who wins, I will champion reproductive rights, treat others with respect and kindness, advocate for gender equality. No matter who wins, I will help build a more peaceful world. I won't hide from difficult things. I will stay positive, organize for peace, racial equality, and social justice. I will continue to plant trees, show up, make art, continue to love, no matter who wins. Thank you to everybody who made this service possible today. The sound and the video people, the greeters and the ushers and the coffee makers, the planners and the factotums. Let's put out the light. We extinguish this flame. The world calls us to live with depth, meaning, and courage.
We go forth with courage and love.
On the old Jeopardy show, when Alex Trebek was hosting back then, he had a thing he used to do when a contestant took a big risk and crashed to zero. He gave them a look of genuine sympathy, and then he'd sort of straighten up, all business now, and say, start building. Let's us do that too. It's time to remake this world. Let's circle around.